live from the JW Marriott Hotel in Music City, Smashville, USA. It's the Promoter 101 keynote y'all have been waiting for. With SVP of Global Touring, AEG presents Debra Rathwell. Come along with Steinberg and W. Luke Pierce as they take a special journey tickling your minds and your funny bones. Yeehaw. Ooh. Ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. 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 Promoter 101.
Music City, thank you so much for coming out. We are going to have a great time today. Are you ready, Luke?
I am absolutely ready, Dan.
So we'll jump into this a little bit, but we've got a really exciting guest today, and we've got a couple surprises, being the last live interview.
Yes, we do indeed here. We're later on this podcast here today, we have the SVP of Global Touring from AEG presents The Force Behind Elton John, Jojo Siwa, Carrie Underwood. Debra Rathwell is here today for a sit-down interview. Please, round of applause for her. That and a lot more later here. We've got a few things that we would love to do right before we bring Debra onto stage here. So we want to talk about something that's important to us for the past 6-7 weeks here, a partnership with Music Cares.
So we've done these t-shirts this year where 100% of the funds that we've raised, all of the gross, goes to Music Cares. The guys from Prism are here today. They matched the first $10,000 we raised, and they're here today with a check for $10,000 made out to Music Cares.
Give it up.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. If you're in that world, check it out, prism.fm.
Should we talk about the badass of the year?
Yes, we should, absolutely, because he is here today. And those of you who listen to our theme song on the way in here might know this guy. But for the past 3 years, we've been designating a badass of the week as well as a badass of the year. And this will be our final one here today. So, Dan, who do we have here?
This year goes out to Craig Newman, a great agent and an amazing bro.
And
Craig, come up here and grab this thing.
Welcome on out. Craigie Fresh. Do you have anything to say for anything? I know you got something to say.
You are witnessing the greatest moment in the history of the entertainment industry with two of the greatest people in the entertainment industry.
That's wonderful. I'll slip you some money later.
Getting pretty deep up here.
Before we kick things off with Debra's interview, we have a final war story, and we think it's only appropriate because this guy was the first guest on this show that he be our last war story. So welcome now for our final war story, Tom Ross.
It only seemed appropriate if we were going to do a final episode. We should have back our very first guest for the last war story ever. I can't think of a better way. Tom Ross, welcome back to the podcast. There's a certain alpha and omega about this whole thing coming full circle, bringing you in.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be part of Steiny's farewell. When we started, who knew what this could be? But I'm really thrilled to be part of this.
Well, I can't think of a better person to be here and join us while we tie it to a tree and shoot it. So,
I want to thank you and all your staff who have maintained and combed the industry for people of interest and people doing novel things and people doing just a good job. So on that note, again, I wanted to share with your listeners a fun story and also hopefully entertaining. But back in the mid-90s, I was at CAA. We were very aware of the fact that branding was becoming more and more central to the profitability of touring. And we said, what are we going to do about it? We have a commercial department, but they're really focused on getting TV stars and movie stars and endorsements. And there were certain clients and certain advertisers who wanted the market of what music brought to them and the younger buyers, and there were those that didn't. And I knew we needed to fill that gap. We needed to be big players in that world. And through a series of meetings, actually it was through Tina Turner, did a big commercial for Hanes. And that was through a big ad agent in New York, who I'm not going to name, but we'll call him Peter. We started to become friends, and it was a good relationship, and he brought us a lot of business and a lot of good ideas. We did some great things together. But he came out to California, spent a month out here. So I took him to dinner, and we were friends at the time. He said, let's have a social dinner. And at the time, he was out in Malibu, and there was a Wolfgang Puck restaurant out there. This guy was a big domo, had his own plane. We're meeting for dinner at this restaurant, and as we're talking, he absolutely gets flabbergasted, looks over down across the room, and, it was a fairly celebrity-filled room, and he sees Don Rickles. And here's a guy fairly savvy in the business, and he just goes to pieces. He goes, "Oh, my God, Don Rickles." He said, "You don't understand. Don Rickles is my hero." And I said, "Well, I'm glad you're excited about him. It's not in my world," but he couldn't stop staring at him. He couldn't stop looking over him. And he was all the way across the room, so it wasn't obvious to them. But my wife, Sydney, decides halfway through the meal, she needs to go to the bathroom. She goes to the bathroom, and on her way out, we see, lo and behold, she's at the table where Don Rickles is, and she's talking to him. I'm thinking, she doesn't know who Don Rickles is. He doesn't know her. What's going on? And about a minute later, I see her motioning. Come here. I said, "You got to go over." And he said, "Oh, I can't. Oh, my God, I don't know what to do." I said, "She wants you to. She's there. Go meet this guy." So he goes over, and he meets his hero. Sydney was there at the table because he was having dinner with Joe Smith, who was then the head of Elektra Records and the famous record company head, and they were very good friends. So she had worked in charities with the wife, and so that's how she actually, because I was wondering, how in the world did you stop at Don Rickles' table? So Peter goes over there, and he comes back, and he's like, "Man, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened. You have pulled off a miracle, a dream of my life." He said, "I cannot believe this." And, he doesn't stop. So he was over the moon and gaga the rest of the meal. And we finish our meal, and, now I'm even further up the ladder of people that he wants to please. And I pay for the bill, and we walk out the restaurant, and we get outside, and I said to him, "You should have had him give you an autograph." And he goes, "Oh, my God. Why didn't I think of that? You're right. Oh." And I said, "Hey, let me take care of it." So I go back in the restaurant, and Wolfgang Puck's wife at that time was running the restaurant. I said, "Barbara, can I have one of your menus?" And so she gives me a menu, and I take the menu, and I say, "You got a pen?" And I write, "To Peter, go fuck yourself, Don Rickles." And sign it, take it out to him. He doesn't know that it's me, and I give it to him, and he is phenomenally excited. And he opens it up, and when he reads it, he's devastated. I said, "What's wrong?" I could see in his face, it's like, "Oh, my God." And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "He told me to go fuck myself." And I said, "It's Don Rickles. What should he say? Go have a wonderful life?" "Oh, you're right. Yeah. So now he's back excited. I'm back up in the top 10 of his list. He goes home, calls me the next day. He can't stop with his praise of what an amazing time this was. And the next time I go to New York, I go visit him at his office, and there, right in the back of his office chair, he's got this menu framed with Don Rickles' autograph. And I go, "Oh, shit. What am I going to do? Someone's going to come in here and ask him about this, or who knows who's going to say, 'That's not Don Rickles' signature.'" So I freak out. I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think it would be this big of a deal with him, that he would actually frame it. And I immediately say, I got to do something. I called Joe Smith and I said, Joe, I got a funny story to tell you. Let me tell you what happened. I need your help. And I explained what happened. And Joe Smith is irate. He said, how could you do that? And I said, well, it was a kind of a gag. I didn't think anyone would be offended. He said, I'm offended. Don Rickles, I can't believe you would do that. And I said, so I want to get him the real one. He said, I don't want anything to do with it. And that was going to be my quick fix, to at least go back there and say, look, here's the real one. And I couldn't get it. And Joe was pretty upset with me. And so I'm sitting there having been turned down. I don't know what to do. And at that time, the Walkman was the mode of listening from Sony. Sony Walkman, everyone had a Sony Walkman. And Men in Black was a CAA picture, and they were doing Men in Black 2, and Peter wanted to do something special with the next Ray-Ban glasses that they wore. And I came up with this idea that actually just now I see that Bose has come out with. This is 20 some odd years later. But I came up with it. I first said, we have Beck and we have the Counting Crows and we have this artist. And he said, no, that's too common. I said, they can do endorsements, wear your glasses. Oh, no, that's mundane. I said, well, let me think about it. And the next trip in, I thought I would be coming with the autographed picture to return it, which I couldn't. But I came up with this idea of, like, Ray-Ban has thick frames. Why don't you have a little swivel from the earpiece that can lodge into the frame, and that way you can wear sunglasses and the swivel would fit in as earbuds, and you hook into your Walkman and you can have the eye and the ear, I hear you. And he goes, oh my gosh, that's the greatest idea. And for a while, he said, we're doing a standalone company that Ray-Ban wants $10 million, that he wants to invest $10 million in this. And I thought, he said, you got to decide whether you want to be in this business or, if this is CAA property. And I said, no, CAA. It was during a CAA forum, and I have to share it with them. And we thought we were going to make a fortune on this. But meanwhile, I hadn't figured out how to replace his autograph. And I said, you know what? I got to be just up front with him. And I went back and on my next trip and I told them that's not real. And that was the end of a good long run with a client. I blew it. We did do some business, but only because I had some big clients, but it ended the friendship. And it was a good lesson to learn that having fun isn't always the easiest thing. I didn't feel right not telling him that it wasn't the real deal. But I loved the idea that this guy was offended at first, and then at the end, he said, oh, yeah, that's what Don Rickles would say. So I did a good coverage of what Don Rickles would do in a phone. And for years, it's been one of the fun stories that I've shared with people that they've howled at. So I hope that was a good lead into how important today's sponsorship is in the world of rock and roll and touring.
Tom, how long did he have the fake signature in his offers?
I would say 2 months.
Okay, so it wasn't like it was years before you came to it.
No. I had to be, once I found I couldn't replace it, like I say, I'm thrilled that you've been the model to a lot of young people who want to have a career in this business. You've given them examples of things that happen and how to overcome it and ideas, and you've helped build an army. That's what the music business has become. It's an army, but it's a small army. And I think you've touched on all of the troops and rallied them and given them great advice through the people that you've interviewed through Promoter 101.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. I'm so excited that you're our final war story, the first guest, the last war story. We're ending it all where we started. Tom Ross, an icon, a legend, right here on Promoter 101.
Dan, I appreciate it. Go fuck yourself.
What a great last industry tale from Tom Ross. Always an icon and a mensch. Thrilled to have him right here on Promoter 101 for our very last war story.
Promoter 101 Flashbacks.
Episode 70.
Michael Rapino.
Irving Azoff was part of Live Nation not so long ago, and you seem to have kept a pretty close relationship, as we saw in the intro. Where does Live Nation start and Oakview Group end? Because it seems a little blurry.
Yes, we do get asked that. So where do I start? Let's start with Irving. Irving, as we all know in this industry, there's a few from David Geffen to Irving to, I guess, Jimmy Iovines. There's just a few of these mentors in life, or these people that have just been incredible at building their businesses, their brands, and being the king of the industry. So Irving being part of Live Nation was instrumental in really the strategic move of Live Nation and Ticketmaster coming together. That really took us from a small, in terms of a balance sheet, to where we are today, and let us kind of really excel our growth. But ultimately, Irving as an entrepreneur and what he does on his own is much better for him to soar. And we both mutually have a huge respect for Tim. I always had a ton of respect for Tim, even when we competed. He's a tough competitor. I dreaded the days when someone would walk in and say, I'd be in a pitch meeting and I knew they were going to meet him after, because that man could sell, ice to an Eskimo. He's good. He's done a fabulous job. We have no ownership in OVG, zero. We're huge supporters of OVG, which Irving is an investor in. We loved him. We hope he grows on whether it's an alliance, whether it's a Seattle, his development of buildings, his Polestar. So we're huge supporters. We'll continue to be cheerleaders, and we'll be business partners selectively where it makes sense for our business. And I think people like Tim are creators, and entrepreneurs like him, we need lots of those in this business.
All right, well, are you guys ready for your main course, the final Promoter 101 interview? It's happening right now.
Absolutely. So let's now make welcome to the stage the SVP of Global Touring from AEG presents Miss Debra Rathwell.
So when we asked AEG's CEO, Jay Marciano, to describe Debra, he used the following words: creative, intellectual, with an amazing work ethic and a travel bug. She's the total package. Pretty high praise from one of the biggest guys in the game. Welcome to our show.
It's good to be here. It's good to be with you. I've had everyone come up to me and tell me I get to be the last person on your podcast, and so I'm glad for the honor, and thank you.
Well, the honor is all ours. Luke, the honor of the first question is yours.
I think it would be good to talk a little bit about some Debra Rathwell history. You've got some small beginnings in Quebec, Canada, from a town of 300 people. How did you end up here in Nashville promoting Elton John from Quebec?
So I grew up in a very small town called Low, Quebec, and it was called Low, named after a person, not because it was particularly low. There were probably 300 or 400 people who lived in this town. It was largely agricultural and very much divided along Protestant and Catholic lines because it was a kind of Irish-English town in the land that was forgotten, And I lived there because my father worked for a hydroelectric power dam and my mother was a school teacher. We grew up very poor. We didn't have any money for anything, but we were able to just roam wild, and we did lots of things using our imagination. And, we used to sneak into the lumber yard and take out wood and go and build cabins in the woods, and then we'd start clubs, and we had scavenger hunts, and we went swimming in the beach, where the logs came down out of the log chute off the power dam, and just really crazy stuff. And I went to a one-room schoolhouse, and we used to, walk a mile and a half every day there and back. And if you wanted money, you looked for bottles in the ditch, and you took them to the store, and you got 5 cents and 10 cents from that, and you saved it. And so after going to one-room schoolhouse, I was probably about, let's say 10 or 11 years old. We eventually were bussed out to a larger school. This is still elementary school, and it's about 1964. And I and my brothers and sisters show up, and everyone wanted to know if we were from the orphanage. We had these flouncy dresses on like we were living in hand-me-downs from my cousin. And we had no idea there was this other world out there. So I came home, and I was apoplectic. I needed a mini skirt. They wore stockings. It was like I had been dropped into another universe, and it was just embarrassing. I would just remember having this conversation with my mother. She got me some fabric and some patterns, and I made some clothes. And eventually she was able to, find some things that were suitable. And I think from that first incident, that's when I knew you were never, ever, ever going to do that to me again. Okay? I was going to scrap my way out of this. You were never going to say I was from an orphanage. I was going to have clothes that mattered. I was going to hang out with the girls top of the class. And it's kind of the time when I never looked back. I mean, I just kept going.
So you lived in the outskirts of town in a small village, and as a music fan, that had to be hard to get your music fix. How did you go about getting music?
So when I was in grade 2, the school board used to give us a prize at the end of the year, and I asked them if I could have Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison. That was my first single that I ever received as a gift. I used to save Coke bottle tops, and I could send away to the Montreal Star, and for 99 cents, they would send me albums. So my 99 cents and my Coke bottle caps, and I could get albums. There was always music in our life, though. My mom she studied 7 years at the conservatory. She was the church organist. We grew up with the American Songbook. There was always singing. We had Catholic friends, and they had nuns over, and they had fiddles and things. And, of course, I had to go to Irish dance classes. I mean, just silly stuff like that. So there was always music. But it really wasn't until I was able to see the other side of the world when I left our small town that I knew where I wanted to be. I mean, music became very important.
And how did you find a job and a way out of that town? What was your first gig in music?
Oh, my first gig was down the road. I mean, I started babysitting when I was about 12. I did that every weekend. There was a hotel, and the lady who ran it had 2 kids, so I minded them every Saturday, Sunday. And then I became a waitress when I was about 15 at a place called the Country Kitchen, and I did that all the way through my second year of university. So I worked the morning shift. I liked the fishermen in the morning. They were good tippers. To this day, I have nothing but respect for people who serve you in a restaurant.
So no woman had ever become a concert manager at the time. How did you become the first one and kind of break that glass ceiling?
I went to Carleton University. Canada is very generous in finding a way for their young people to go to school, so it wasn't very expensive. I went to Carleton University in what was my qualifying year, meaning I took the last year of high school at university because I was from a province that was missing a year. So I moved into a rooming house and went off to university. But it was in my 4th year that I needed a room, and I tore that number off a little piece of paper on the bulletin board, called this woman. Her name was Cindela Whitney, and she was a poet and singer-songwriter. And she was crazy, and she thought I was crazy, so it was perfect. She had all these really interesting musical friends, and they were always over at the house. One of them told me that the person who owned the radio station, the stereo stores, the record stores, the concert company, his executive assistant was leaving after 13 years. So I applied for the job. I completely lied. I did everything. There was nothing I didn't do. But I know he hired me because I read the New York Times every Sunday. And I think he thought that was the oddest thing in the whole world. So he gave me a shot, and I went to work for him, and I gave great phone. If there's one thing I could do, I was good on the phone.
If there's one quote from today, you give great phone.
I mean, I remember one of the vice presidents asking if I would come in and take dictation, and I went, you know what? You just tell me what you want to write, and I'm going to go write it for you. So, I mean, everything I just made up on the fly and handled whatever problems there were. But the office in front of me was the concert manager, and I loved what he did, and he involved me in everything. So my first show was Weather Report, and my second show was the McGarrigle Sisters, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And I knew I was going to do this for the rest of my life. You were never, ever, ever getting rid of me. I was the earliest in and the last to leave. I did everybody's job. I made myself you couldn't do your job without me. And eventually he left and he went back to Buffalo. His father died and he had to go help in the family business. And I asked, could I be the concert manager? So it was Harvey Glatton and Harold Levin who ran Bass Clef, had to have a conversation with Michael Cole and Donald K. Donald, who were our partners at the time, if they would accept a woman as a concert manager. And they said yes. So that's how I started booking concerts. Terrified, but I did it. Those were the days when you had to write all your expenses out, financially work out your deal, and then you had to call the agent, and then you had to run down all your numbers from top to bottom, have a personality while you were on the phone, and then hope that he was going to sell you what you were putting your offer in for.
The old school Saturday morning on sales and the hustle that came with that, for sure. You touched on it a little bit, but in your time in bass clef, you got to know Donald K. Donald and Michael Cole. How did that interaction first come about? What was the first meeting like?
So I'm selling tickets for a Styx concert in the box office. I mean, helping out at the box office. You had to do everything. You had to run around to all departments and help people. And I got this big hand on my butt, and it's like, so you must be Debbie. And that was Donald. That was my first meeting with him. But it was just the funniest thing ever, because that's the relationship we had. And it's not very HR today, and nobody understands these things, but it was kind of silly. So I knew Donald and Michael from the beginning at working at Bass Clef, because we were partners with them. I mean, Donald was an impresario before Michael, and then Hal Ray at, I guess, William Morris, whatever at the time, made them become partners on Bee Gees because he was tired of listening to them fight, so they became partners. So Arthur Fogel worked for Michael in Toronto, and then I worked for Donald eventually in Montreal when I left.
So at 27, you wind up working for DKD.
So Donald used to call me and ask me if I wanted to come and work for him. I always said no, because I just didn't. I was an executive assistant. Why did I want to go be another one? I was a concert manager at the time. What was I going to do? So he made me a vice president. And I was 27 years old.
Never take the first offer.
And I got a car, and the salary was pretty good. And so there was a TV show at the time, Mary Tyler Moore. You know, she was the first single woman to go off to Minneapolis and have a really great job and leave a single life. And so I remember driving to Montreal, and I was Mary Tyler Moore, and this was just the beginning. So
the inspiration, like throw your hat in the air when you got there.
Yeah.
What was some of the most important lessons in those early days with Donald? You had to come away with a phenomenal amount of experience and language, and a lot of cool things being worked on during that time.
Well, I should tell you that when I got there, it wasn't that I had this really great office prepared for me in Montreal. I had a desk beside Donald. So I then spent the next 6 months having to sit beside him. And, it was, who are you on with? Who are you talking to? What's going on? What are you saying? What are you saying? What are you buying? How much? What are you doing? And I did this for about 6 months. And today I can't tell you how invaluable it was to have one of the greatest concert promoters in the world spend 6 months teaching you how to be a really great concert promoter. He would try and explain to you why that's not a good deal. This is a better deal. And we had to up our game. We bought more shows. I had to understand more markets and what was going on at the time. So then I got to go and have my own office. But that was invaluable. I mean, if he had never done that, I don't think I would be who I am today.
How much of those fundamentals are you carrying today? You talk about being good at very basic things and having come to this quick instinct with things that's probably crafted over time. But how much of those early lessons are you still working with on a daily basis today?
I would have to say all of them. You have to remember that it takes a moment to get really good in this business. It just doesn't happen overnight. I think you have to get battered about a little bit. You have to get bruised. You have to make some mistakes. You have to learn from them. I mean, I can tell you, I'd watch Donald let me make mistakes, I think, just so I could learn from them. Probably wasn't until I was about 38 that I really thought, I got it. You're never getting me again. Like I am master of the universe now. But those were early days, and that's 10 years into the future at that time. But the things that I learned, I use now, and I've really kind of summed up much later than then. That was just living the moment. And, I'll give you an example. When I was back at Bass Clef, I figured out that I could get things from them. So I convinced them that I needed to go to Midem every year, because that would be really important, that I went to the south of France to the big music conference. So I used to do that. And I never went to the conference. I went to every party. I stayed out all night. It was the greatest thing. But,
you earned it.
Whatever. But I was on the plane, and Tina Turner was sitting in front of me. And I thought, that's so interesting. She was just about to have Private Dancer come out as a big hit. And she was actually there to promote her music in Midem, which was before everybody else would know about it. This was not internet warp speed that was going to happen at the time. And so I got back and I called Brad Gelfarn at Triad at the time. And Tina was busy working on the McDonald's restaurant corporate circuit, doing engagements for them at the time. And so I said, can I buy a date? And so he sold me a date in Montreal for $12,500 at the Spectrum, which was a big club in Montreal. So now let's go back to I'm Donald, and he overhears me buy Tina Turner for $12,500, and he goes, "What are you doing?" He's like having a fit that I've done this, and everyone in the office thinks it's a really good idea. So lo and behold, doesn't Private Dancer come, and doesn't Rolling Stone magazine want to know about this date? And here comes Roger Davies, and then he took full credit for it because it was everything he did. The show was so oversold because everybody had to go that there was one of the times where after playing Run the Fire Marshal around the buildings enough time, showing him things, like maybe he won't notice, I finally had to ask Tina Turner, I finally had to say, you can't do the encore because they're going to pull the sound. And these were the learning things. But that was one of the things is if you see something, say something. So Tina Turner on a plane, I came back, I did something. We had 2 or 3 really successful tours with Tina Turner and Roger Davies' best friend for life. So,
not a bad end.
Yeah.
So in the days of the territorial systems, before everybody was promoting globally, Frank Barcelona had the network, and you worked for the guys that had the regions on the Frank Barcelona network. What was that time like?
It was good. You were respected because you were in a certain territory, so you didn't have to sit and worry about something coming to encroach on you, because most of the agents didn't allow that to happen. You were trusted in your marketplace because you were the eyes and ears. There was no internet. There was nothing to go look to see what was going on. Were you clashing with another show? Was there a problem? That was your job. And we were able to space shows out so they didn't come on top of each other, stuff like that. But the National Promoters Association came along in 1985, and that was actually the first time that a whole bunch of promoters got together in a room. And though they were never allowed to talk about any business, there was just, you could blink. Was it good or bad? I mean, it's like that kind of thing. So, and that really unnerved the agents because this was the first time that promoters could actually not discuss what was going on in the market. I remember that first year or the second year, they ran this list and it appeared in USA Today, and it was the best and worst shows, live shows. Oh my God. I thought the agents would lose their minds.
Was it by gross or was it by just talent, best or worst?
Probably, cumulative attendance and gross.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the back page of Polestar.
That never happened again, but it was really great to get their attention, And that was because Ben and Cynthia at the time, they would accumulate, like we actually reported, to them because we were busy trying to get, remember, BMI, ASCAP, and get a deal so we could get it calculated properly and reported and things. So anyways, so go back to Frank Barcelona. So at Donald's office, we used to have to do lots of other shows to make a living.
Cool
Rock and roll stars didn't come across the border. Right. I mean, they would do their few shows and they were done. Canada had a different currency and it had a 15% withholding tax. So if you were coming to Canada, sometimes it didn't happen. So we used to do things. We did the Moscow Circus. We had Jerry Gunman from Montreal Forum went over and he handpicked the Russian acts that were going to be in it. And this is when Donald used to say this was when the Russians had 2 heads, which he means like nobody had seen behind the Iron Curtain. So it was amazing to go and see them. So we did that, which was very successful. And then Steve Lieber came and took it back to America. I went to Nottingham and I saw Torval and Dean, who had just won the gold Olympic for skating at a tent in Nottingham, England. And I brought them back, and that was a big success in Canada, though we didn't take it down here. But it was a show called Tango Argentino that we had at the Place des Arts in Montreal. This was a show that came from the Châtelet Theater in Paris, designed by 2 Argentinian directors. And the co-promoter wanted to know if we wanted to do it in New York at the Mark Hellinger Theater, which was on Broadway. And Donald goes, "Yeah, but is it good?" And I said, "Yeah, it's good." So we went to our financial director who kept all the accounting for the company in his top pocket. I'm not sure why, but he let us know we could have $250,000 we could lose on this venture we were going to go and do. And doesn't it turn out to be the greatest hit that ever happened? I mean, New York Times says you need to run, don't walk. Everybody must go. And it really was a show about elderly tango dancers dancing tango. It was the history of tango. That show made so much money. It went everywhere around the world. I mean, it changed lives. And so I got an apartment in New York, which is how it changed my life. And so from the around 1985 to 89. I had an apartment in New York and I spent a lot of time there. So now you get back to Frank Barcelona. And so I used to go over, and George Cavedo was an agent there, and he was the only person without kids that would come out and party with me every night because everybody else had to go home. So I would go over, and while I was waiting for George to finish work, I used to go flop on Frank Barcelona's couch, and I used to sit and listen to old stories and entertain him while waiting for George. I did lots of that stuff when I was in New York and kind of working on Broadway shows, and everybody wanted to know what I was doing. So I made a lot of friends in the industry and a lot of agents and a lot of people I might never have known if I just stayed in Montreal and not had that experience.
Obviously, when you started with Bass Clef, DKD and Michael Cole were partners, but DKD would later sell to Michael Cole, right? And you had the opportunity to go work with John Scher, a little change in direction in life, right?
Yeah, I think Donald made so much money on Tango Argentino, he wanted a different life, and so he was selling it. He actually got into the record business. He couldn't have timed something worse than making that decision. I was really going to go with Michael, and then Donald and I sat down, had a long talk, and he said, you should go to New York. You belong in New York. And I said, all right. And he actually called John Scher and arranged for me to go there and be buyer there. And I didn't really know John Scher very well. I ended up spending 9 years there, praying to God every day that he would find me a job in Manhattan so I didn't have to go to New Jersey anymore. He did. But yeah, that's the story of that. So I gave up a country, gave up everything, got a moving van, came down here. With John Scher, I worked with Jimmy Koplik to start. So he was there. I love Jimmy. I mean, I love him to this day. So it took me some time to kind of learn the lay of the land. We had a pretty big territory that we booked, so I had to understand, what pieces went together. And John stayed in Manhattan. He didn't come out to the New York office very often. So we ran all the concerts. And then eventually Jimmy left. A lot of people left. And so I ran everything.
Well, it's been said that in your time at DKD and working for John that you wound up running pretty much the whole organization. You were the mastermind behind that.
Yeah, and even more so at the end because, John was instructed to sell the company and it didn't quite happen the way he wanted it to. So, I took it over, and Keith Becchia, who was his other partner at the time, kind of did the business part. So we did that. Then it was sold to Mitch Slater, and Mitch Slater had it. I tell this story and I go for like 5 years, but it was like 9 months, but felt like 5 years, When
that happened, the sale, when John sold to Mitch, you made a call to Randy Phillips, which introduced a new person in your life, probably changed your trajectory again. So how did that phone call go in the early 2000s?
So when Mitch sold the company, I got a phone call at home on a Sunday night, and he said, I've sold the company, and you're to go to, I think it was actually Clear Channel for about 5 minutes more before it became Live Nation at that exact time. So I was to go and see Don Law, Dominic Roncasic in their offices on Monday morning, so I did that. I sat in an office with two men with their feet up on their desk who mostly wanted to talk about John Scher. So I said, you have a place for me here in New York? And they said, no, but something might open up in Tampa or Seattle. And I said, great, I'll get back to you. So I walked out of there. I called Randy Phillips and John Meglin, and within a half hour, I was opening an office in New York. And I think the thing that distressed me so much at the time was the fact that all of my team, all of the people that worked for me were just out of work. That was so wrong to me. I mean, these are really amazing people. That was the beginning of December 2002, and I was open January 13, 2003. I had 8 people. I had no shows. I had nothing. But I had the faith from Randy and John. So
right off the bat, you were getting real shows. Like Elton Billy was your first show, right?
So while I was getting ready to open my new office, I had Dennis Arfa and Howard Rose calling me, well, are you doing it? Are you doing it? We need to know. And they were so incensed that I had worked on Billy and Elton shows, and suddenly they were taken away from me. And I guess the people at Live Nation were bragging about it, that they just felt very strongly about giving me a show to open my new office. So that was a pretty important announcement to announce that and new office. What's so interesting about that is if you fast forward to the present, Dennis Arfa has given me Billy Joel at the Syracuse Carrier Dome Stadium a couple of times. And I've been working with him at Madison Square Garden on the residency, to which we're going to go into our 7th year. And here I am with Howard Rose. Since 2017, we've been working on the 3-year farewell Yellow Brick Road tour with Elton John. So here they are. They're my first and, probably my last favorite agents. So
around that same time in 2002, you met your husband, Harry Sandler, who was a tour manager to some of the biggest stars on the planet, Barbra Streisand, John Mellencamp, Billy Joel, Jewel, a lot of names in there. You met then, and sadly, although he did pass in 2017, he was a big part of your life while you started the AEG office up. You want to say anything about Harry?
Yeah, he was the love of my life, and I miss him every day. I have to tell you a funny story, though, that we have known each other since 1980, and this is back to Ottawa, and I had Bruce Springsteen at the Ottawa Civic Center. This was a mail-in event, which meant you had to put your check in an envelope and mail it to us, and then we would pick who was going to go and send you your tickets. It was the first and only time I ever had an editorial cartoon, stuck behind a desk with letters and mail bags. So it was a very important event, this Bruce Springsteen show at the Ottawa Civic Center. And in the afternoon of that day, Bruce came in and he walked the venue. Who knew? And he decided that some of the seats didn't warrant tickets being sold, and we were supposed to do something about it. So the people who needed to come and tell me about that were Harry Sandler, George Travis, and Bill Bannon, the record company guy. So I'm a kid, but I'm me. And they started with, you need to refund the tickets. And I said, no, I won't do that. And then they'd run back in their office. And then I was to, give money back on the tickets. And then I was to go on the radio station and make some sort of announcement. And I just refused to do all those things. And then finally, they were so annoying. I just stood there and I started to cry because I could make myself cry. And they all ran back into their office, and I never heard another word about it again. And that's how Harry Sandler and I met. And we have been friends ever since that. I stood up to them the whole time, and then I got rid of them by, So, yeah. I have to tell you, there was only one time I was so persevering on something that I actually had Rob Light on the phone, and I started to cry, and he said, are you crying? And I went, yeah, I really am. And then I immediately had to call everyone I knew in the industry to tell them what I'd done, so he couldn't tell them first, so everybody knew, but yeah. But that was really crying. That was because I was disappointed. But this was please go away crying. Yes. So.
You've been known to say, don't take no for an answer. Take not yet. Can you tell us about that?
Well, it goes back to, if you want a job and you really think you should have a job and somebody goes no, I think you have to have a sense of humor about things. But I would always go, you really mean not yet, right? You don't really mean no. Like, I'll be back.
Yeah.
So I've used that with an agent who tells me no, and I'm like, you mean no today, but I'm going to call you later, okay? We'll rediscuss it. I'll be back. Sometimes it's used with a manager, that they're just not feeling good about you. I'll get all these things done, and then your no's going to go away, and I'll be back. It's a not yet. Just one of those things.
Persistent.
Yes.
Outside of the music business, you're known as an avid runner and an avid reader. You run every day, right?
Yeah, it's so funny. We just had this retreat, and there's 50 touring people in the room, and we had this speaker come, and he asked how many people run. And there were 2 people who said maybe they ran a mile or 2 a week. And I thought, that's so pathetic. So I have, internally I said that. So since I was 27, I have been running. I only ever ran one race, and it was a 5K. And I was so slow and horrible. I kept this one woman behind me who I'd have thrown in the ditch because I wasn't going to be last. That's all I knew. And I've never raced or run again, but I run 3.5 miles every day. I run outdoor. I've never been on a treadmill in my life. I run every day that I can. It's just the greatest thing. It grounds me,
Is that a morning thing for you? Or?
Morning. Yep. Right up, right out. And you can't think about it. People go, how do you run? And I go, well, you get a pair of shoes, you open the door, and then you run. And you go to point A, and then you run home. That's it.
So you're also said to be a pretty avid reader. You read all the time. Who are your favorite authors?
Pat Conroy, Richard Russo, Philip Roth, Margaret Atwood. I've probably read half the classics. I'd love to quit work tomorrow and read the other half.
And word has it in the classics, you're also a pretty big history buff as well, too, right?
A huge history buff. I love the rabbit hole that history is. I mean, I can't just read one thing without having to go and understand all the interlying and dissecting things that go with that. I had a job when I was in college working in the stacks at the Ottawa Public Library. Oh my God, that was like going to heaven. And sometimes they'd forget about me and I could be up there for hours and hours and hours. So I could have easily gone there and been happy to. But lately I do a lot of traveling. So I go and I get the Guardian list of top 100 books for that country, and then I go read them all. And then I get some history books, and then I go there. So I'm really knowledgeable when I get there. That's what I do. It's my fun.
So going from being a territorial promoter to being able to promote throughout the entire country, the entire continent, and now globally, takes a skill set that not everybody has, but you've fallen into that. How did you make the adjustment?
I think opening the office with AEG and having no shows that late in life and taking all your skills that you had developed up to that point was what kind of got us going. The funny thing in that year that I also had Billy and Elton, I also had Jeff Frasco make the round. Well, he had made the rounds the year previous to try and find someone that would take this crazy show called American Idol. And everybody turned it down and told him to get lost. And I said, remember, I come from Moscow Circus, Torval and Dean, Tango Argentina, all these crazy things. And I said, send me the stuff. I'll have a look at it. And I thought it was really funny. So I took it. We had 3 dates we did with Mitch, under Mitch Slater, the 5-year, 9-month, tour of duty. And so that was the tour. So I did the first big American Idol tour in the year that I opened the office. So that was very helpful in one of the establishing. I mean, it paid the bills. So from American Idol, we did Clay and Ruben and Kelly and Justin. And it was big at the time that it was when people watched television and they watched it at a specific time and then they talked about it the following day. That doesn't happen anymore. And I think it was pre-internet when if you wanted to see somebody, you had to go see them. It wasn't all laid out for you online. Then we did Say Think It Can Dance, and from that I did Dancing with the Stars, America's Best Dance Crew, America's Got Talent. It's starting to get pretty thin though. And then I did The Voice at the end, and that's when it finally was all over. There's no more live market for that. The magic just wasn't there anymore.
Not for the TV, but from some of the stars that came from that, you're still working with today. Carrie Underwood.
Yes,
anyway. Yeah.
Yes, Carrie Underwood today. It's biggest star from that, and she's just extraordinary. In her last show that she did this year, her 360 tour, and watching the show, she's no longer the girl from American Idol. It's not even that anymore. She's one of the big girls, she's Loretta Lynn and Tammy and Shania, and she can walk tall with all of them. I mean, she's really that to this day. She is so amazing and self-assured, and she can't even put all her hits in her show anymore because it's too full, so.
It's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
And you've moved into the family business too. You're doing Nickelodeon kid stuff. That's expanded on.
Jeff Frasco, same agent, American Idol, also represented Disney. And he said, do you want to do Cheetah Girls? If you've ever watched the show Raven, you'd know Cheetah Girls. So I did 87 arena dates with the Cheetah Girls, which was just amazing. And from that, we moved on to do Hannah Montana, which was probably one of the greatest phenoms ever. I mean, we were sued by, 11 attorney generals for overpromising and under-delivering because we didn't have enough tickets for people and everybody was calling the attorney general. I mean, it's just a great problem to have. But
and these guys heard of supply and demand?
Yeah, well, that was Hannah, and then did Miley after that.
How did that end?
I think they just wanted the people to get the tickets and go away, and stop bothering their office. But it was pretty intense.
At some point that went away, right? You guys didn't have to pay out for not having enough tickets available.
No. I can't even remember quite what the ticketing was. I don't think it was TM Plus or any of those things or StubHub. You know what I mean? I think it was just you bought a ticket and that was the end of that. So
different world, different time.
Can we talk for a second about JoJo Siwa and the success that, largely YouTube-based and then Nickelodeon-based branding camp has had in the touring world? They've really been able to make that jump from a kind of a branding exercise into a massive arena-level tour that you're rolling out a bunch of shows all over America right now. How did that come to be?
So JoJo Siwa, credit for JoJo has to go back to Adam Weiser, believe it or not.
Yeah.
All right.
Shout out to Adam.
So Adam has 2 daughters who needed these bows, and when he wasn't going to the mall to get them, started to cry. And he's going, I just love that he had to figure it out, because that's part of being a promoter is if you see something, say something or react. So they needed these JoJo Siwa bows. So he made contact with Karen Sterling, who's the manager of JoJo in Pasadena, California. And I was out there. I had Lord on tour, who I love. So I booked lunch, grabbed an Uber, went up to Pasadena after spending, many hours looking at JoJo and trying to understand what it was about. At the time, JoJo had 6.4 million YouTube followers. Wow. She had an arrangement with Nickelodeon, but not necessarily a TV show or anything to hang on. There's just something about it that reminded me of Justin Bieber, who was YouTube all the way. I mean, it wasn't about airplay and only later.
And also an act you were in on very early.
Right. So we liked each other. We made a deal. We decided we would start in theaters. So we did 22 theaters, and now we're right now heading off to, we're in arenas now. 14,000 people in Louisville. I've sold out 35,000 tickets in New York, from sold out Prudential to Nassau to all, just on and on. Now we're going to the UK, and we're going to sell out 2 Dublins, Birmingham, Manchester, O2 in London, Cardiff. And then we're going to Australia, where we're going to sell out 2 Brisbanes, 2 Melbourne, 2 Sydney.
Phenomenal.
And maybe some more.
You're going to be spending a lot of time down in Australia the next couple of months, right? You've got the end of Elton John's 3-year run here, and some of those include a pretty infamous upcoming run here with Michael Chugg down under. Maybe record-breaking even, right?
Yes. So I'm heading to Australia November 27. I've read my 100 books. We start Elton in Perth, so the farthest point to go. And I'll be down there for 2 weeks. But he actually is performing in Australia, doing 40 shows until the beginning of March. He has sold out stadium shows, outdoor shows, multiple arena shows. And no, I was teasing that I think we might beat Pink's record pertaining to gross and tickets sold. She has more shows, and we can't add any more shows, so I can't beat that record. But it's a big market for him, Australia. After North America, it was probably his next biggest market. It's a love affair there.
And this is a 3-year run. It's been being set up in the works for years now at this point, and you're now nearly midway through it, right? What was that process like, looking at this upcoming historic run and how you rolled that out? It's one of the larger scale, huge global rollouts we've seen the last 18 months here, and it seems like it's gone phenomenally well.
This was probably the most expensive press conference that AEG has ever staged. It was in Manhattan. There was a lot of investment in new technology and virtual reality film. You had to wear special glasses to watch it, of his life that was dramatized, made by a film company. Elton was there. He spoke. He played piano. He was interviewed by Anderson Cooper. And doing it in such a large, lavish way was the smartest thing we ever did. And the news went round the world. You can't go anywhere in the world if somebody doesn't know Elton's retiring. And it's amazing how many people know it's 3 years, too. So they really resonated. We're busy right now putting up the rest of the dates in 2020, and probably by the end of November, all of 2020 will be on sale, and then we'll pivot to 2021. And, when Harry passed away the summer of 2017, I had been working on it with Jay, and, he finally called and said, I just need to know if you're in. I have a business, I have to run it. And I made the decision to stay in, and it was the smartest thing I did, because, it was hard to go right back to work and go work on it, but I did, and I have no regrets. I even say that Elton saved my life,
What about your career? Looking back, what is the most exciting moments of your career that you look back and are like, yeah, I'm proud of that most?
I always get sort of jumbled when somebody has me pick a favorite, because I kind of love everybody. I can go back to Ottawa when I had Elvis Costello at Algonquin University, and we had so many people in there that the water was running down the wall. Yeah. I remember I had to get to the fire marshals. The fire marshals play a big part in my life, from one end of the building to the other. So I remember running through Elvis Costello's dressing room while he's in there dressing, going, I gotta go, and just running right through the other side. And I thought that was just hysterical. That was funny. I remember doing police at the Université de Montréal in their student building and hanging out with the police and their team afterwards. I thought that was great. I remember drinking beer with U2 in a club called Barrymore's in Ottawa. And I remember telling them they were going to be a really big band. So, you heard it here first. My first Radiohead show was in a club in Albany. I remember when I was buying the show, Wayne Forte was the agent, and I was quibbling over the money. And he basically said, "What is wrong with you? They're going to be the biggest band in the world. Just pay it." And I said, "All right, you're done." So, that was a good thing.
I think he says that on all his bands, though. That's a Wayneism for sure.
He was right on this one. We went on to do a lot of shows with them and still do shows with them. It's just so amazing. The greatest show I've ever been part of was probably Woodstock 1994. That had to be the most insane event because it rained every day. It was mud. It was just the most screwed up thing, but it was so spectacular. I mean, I can't even describe it. It took me days to get over the Woodstock High after I'd had my car towed out of the mud, and gone home. But I ran the talent to the main stage when they sent them down from the artist's compound. And I remember having 9 Inch Nails dive into the mud and roll around in the mud. And I'm like calling security on a walkie-talkie. And all they were really doing was getting the mud people looks so they could be part of the audience when they were on stage. It was that crazy. Guns N' Roses riot, which wasn't one of my most fun events, but that was...
Which market? Because there's been a couple that Axl started.
Guns N' Roses riot in Montreal.
Okay. Isn't it great that you have to actually just clear which market because he's caused that many problems?
This was Olympic Stadium, sold out. James Hetfield was injured with a flash pot on stage, taken to the hospital. Short set Metallica. Guns N' Roses goes on. I don't know, 4 or 5 songs later, he says, "I'm out of here, get a refund." So the fans took all the seats and piled them up in the center of the stadium and set them on fire. Then they looted the stores. Then they overturned all the police cars. And while all of this was going on, it was Roman theme night backstage. And the runner comes because they need more champagne. You can't make this up, right?
I mean, one thing that's so amazing about so many of your stories and some of your experiences you shared is just your sense of humor about things that are happening wildly at a huge scale, and you're able to deal with it and with a great sense of humor. And that's got to be a big, important part of your life and your process, and doing things with a smile and having that sense of humor. How important has that been in saving your sanity along the way of all these crazy moments?
Well, part of it's the training back with Donald, and he really said it's not worth doing if it isn't fun. We kind of started there, and he was just the greatest. I think I learned a lot of humor from him, so yeah.
We'll leave it with one closing thought here, a question here. You've been known to say, don't be afraid to pass. What does that mean for you, and what does that mean for the people that you offer that advice?
So that's part of one day you just finally wake up and you go, I've got it, and you understand all the things that are going on and you need to do, and that's stop indulging in magical thinking, and that means, I can make this work. No, you can't. It's not going to happen. It's part of knowing when to cut your losses, right? It's not going to work. Call up, own up, cut your best deal, get in, get out. It's part of having good radar. If you see something, be reactive. I've learned so many lessons. Agents are mostly bluffing. They are. I have a great story. I had an agent call me, and he wanted an artist to play at the Hammerstein Ballroom. And I said, "Your artist can't sell 1,500 tickets. It's not going to work. No way, no how." I hang up the phone. The phone rings. It's the agent. The artist is calling you. So I take the artist's phone call. Sure, I buy it. I pay it. I lose $20,000. That had to be, I don't know, like 15 years ago. 2 years ago, I watched them pulling the same play with the same artist. And I was like, whoa. Stop. That's as old as the hills, okay? I'm going to help you with this one. So that was a country act, too, by the way.
You're not going to tell us the act, are you?
They're still alive. If they had passed on, I might have, but no.
Ladies and gentlemen, the great Debra Rathwell, please put your hands together. We wanted to thank you for doing the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us for our last ever interview. A big hand for Debra Rathwell and to our friends at IEBA. Enjoy your conference. Good night. Thank you.
Wow, a phenomenal episode of Promoter 101, a great interview with Debra Rathwell, a phenomenal war story with Tom Ross. That'll do it. That wraps it up. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We appreciate all of our listeners out there and everybody that showed up at IEBA to join us for the final live interview with AEG Presents Debra Rathwell. For those of you not in attendance and didn't get to see Debra pick up a shirt from Promoter 101, you yourself should go online, get a t-shirt. We are, again, so thrilled to team up with the Grammy Music Cares Foundation to do a little good for this business. And you, our listeners, can help out right now. Go over to promoter101.net and click on the merch at the top of the browser. Pick up a stylish t-shirt, maybe a hoodie, $20 for a t-shirt, $50 for the hoodie, and 100% of the gross donation goes to Music Cares. It's all in. There's no additional shipping or handling. We take care of all of it for you. So please get on there. Help out a great cause, and Music Cares.
So thankful to Prism for their $10,000 match. They helped us raise a lot of money. Also, Peter Tempkins, who matched everyone that bought shirts live at IEBA. So awesome. We raised a bunch of money for Music Cares, going to a great place.
If you like what you heard today in the podcast or any of the past podcasts, as always, you can write us. Send us a note to steiny@promoter101.net. Let us know what's on your mind.
Hey, we'll be back this Monday as we take a look back at the last 3 years of the entire Promoter 101 podcast history, hosted by ICM partners Andrea Johnson and AC Entertainment's Ted Heineck, and so many of our friends and contributors that we've come across along the way to help us close this one out. It's going to be a special episode. You might want to grab a box of Kleenex and be ready for just a real emotional ride. It's a really special event.
It is emotional. It's fun. It's going to be our very last recording. Dan and I are going to be answering everyone's questions and sharing some of the back history that didn't make this show or past podcasts. We're going to talk about the craziest moments from the last 3 years. If you have any questions, feel free to come with it. If someone wasn't on the show, how it came to be, worst and best guess ever, all those things are going to get answered. Come check it out. Come behind the curtain. Take a look at Promoter 101.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for 3 amazing years. We are wishing you sold out shows for the week to come. Cheers.
Call your mother.
Ooh. Ba-da-ba-ba.